Have you ever sat under a kitchen light, stitching up memories while the world sleeps? Hey there, my dear friends. It's Eva, your 65-year-old storyteller from Eufaula, Alabama, sipping sweet tea and chatting like we're on my front porch. I'm doing fine, just creaking a bit like an old rocker. But my heart's full, ready to share a tale that'll tug at yours. Today, I'm stepping into the shoes of Maggie Walsh, a woman who's lived a life like so many of us, giving everything for love, only to find her own light dimmed. I'll tell her story as if it's mine, straight from the heart. If you love these stories, hit that subscribe button. It keeps our porch chats going. Now, grab your tea, settle in, and let's walk through Maggie's world together. I've always loved the glow of a kitchen light, not the harsh glare of a living room chandelier or the dreamy flicker of a bedroom lamp, but that soft, steady warmth that wraps around you like a quilt on a chilly night. It's the kind of light that sees you through the quiet moments, mending a torn jacket, stirring a pot of soup, or just sitting with a cup of coffee, wondering where the years went. Today, as I stand in the middle of the Willow Creek Art Fair, surrounded by the hum of folks and the golden hues of an Oregon fall, I'm thinking about that light again, not because I'm in a kitchen, but because I've finally found my own. My name is Maggie Walsh, and I'm 66 years old. I've been a mother, a receptionist, a widow, and, for a long time, someone who thought her best days were behind her. But here I am, standing in front of a painting I made, watching it hang proud in the community center, with a little card that says, "Under the Kitchen Light," by Margaret Walsh. The painting shows my old kitchen, back in the day, a cramped corner of my Willow Creek apartment, with a single bulb casting a golden glow over a worn table. It's where I used to sit, night after night, stitching up my son Ben's clothes, dreaming dreams I never dared to chase. The card next to it reads, "Dedicated to the long nights, the silent sacrifices, and the light that never goes out." I reckon that painting is more than just a picture. It's my whole life, laid bare in brushstrokes and memory. And right now, as I watch the crowd mill around, sniffing apple pies and admiring quilts, I'm not sure if I'm ready for what's coming, because I see them, Ben and Claire, my son and daughter-in-law, walking through the fair, little Samuel in Claire's arms. They don't know I'm here, not yet, but they're heading straight for my painting, and I know, deep in my bones, that this moment is about to change everything. Willow Creek in the fall is something special. The Willamette River sparkles like a sheet of glass, reflecting the red and gold leaves of the sycamores lining its banks. The air smells of cinnamon and wood smoke, and the fairgrounds are alive with the chatter of neighbors, the twang of a local bluegrass band, and the laughter of kids chasing each other through the hay bales. Booths line the lawn, selling everything from homemade jams to carved wooden birds. And folks are bundled up in flannel and knit scarves, sipping cider from paper cups. I'm wearing my favorite beige sweater, the one I splurged on last month, and my silver hair is tied back in a loose bun. I don't look like an artist, not the way I always pictured one, young, wild, with paint-splattered jeans, but standing here, I feel like one, and that's enough. I catch sight of Susan Keller, my friend from the community center's painting class, waving at me from her booth across the way. She's got her own display up, a series of watercolors of the river, and her grin tells me she's proud of me. Next to her is Henry Brooks, a retired teacher who's become like family these past months. He's sipping coffee, his tweed cap tilted just so, and he gives me a nod that says, "You've got this, Maggie." I smile back, but my stomach's doing flips, because Ben and Claire are closer now, pausing at a booth selling pottery, and I know it's only a matter of seconds before they see my painting. A year ago, I wouldn't have been here. I was still living in my old apartment, scraping by on my receptionist's pension, thinking I'd spend the rest of my days as a burden to my son and his wife. They'd made it clear as day when I told them I was retiring Ben, suggesting I pick up a part-time job. Claire hinting I'd be better off in a senior home on the edge of town. I'd given them everything 30 years of long hours, skipped meals, and dreams tucked away in a drawer, also Ben could have a shot at a better life. And in return, they looked at me like I was nothing but a problem to be solved. But then came the letter from Dr. Robert Langley's lawyer. And with it, a gift I never saw coming, $1.2 million, left to me by the man I'd worked for all those years. It wasn't just money, it was freedom, a chance to start over. And it was the spark that lit a fire in me, one that's burning bright today. I hear Claire's voice before I see her face, sharp and polished, cutting through the crowd. Ben, look at this one. It's so quaint. She's standing in front of my painting now. Samuel balanced on her hip, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She's wearing a camel-colored coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to. And her lips are pursed in that way she has, like she's judging the world and finding it wanting. Ben's next to her, hands in his jeans pockets, looking tired. His dark hair's a little messy, and there are lines around his eyes I don't remember from last year. Fatherhood's been hard on him, I reckon. But I don't let myself soften too much. Not yet. They're reading the card now, and I step closer, my heart pounding like I'm a kid about to get caught sneaking cookies. Ben's eyes widen, and he leans in, his voice low. Maggie Walsh. That's Mom's name. Claire shifts Samuel, frowning. Your mom. Mom. She paints since when I clear my throat, and they both turn, startled. Since I decided to live for myself, I say, my voice steadier than I feel. Hello, Ben, Claire. Ben's face goes red, and he stammers. Mom, we didn't know you'd be here. This is your painting, 'tis. I nod toward the canvas. It's called Under the Kitchen Light. Means a lot to me. Claire's eyes dart to the painting, then back to me, and I can see the wheels turning in her head. She's trying to square the woman she's always dismissed, the frumpy receptionist in sensible shoes, with the one standing here. With a painting in a fair, it's nice, she says, but her tone's off, like she's swallowing something bitter. Ben's still staring at the card, reading it again, dedicated to the long nights, the silent sacrifices. His voice cracks, and he looks up at me, his eyes wet. Mom, I didn't know you did all that. He means the nights I stayed up sewing his baseball uniform, the years I worked double shifts at Dr. Langley's clinic to pay for his college, the dreams I buried so he could chase his. I want to tell him it's okay, that I don't need him to know. But another part of me, the part that's learned to stand tall this past year, keeps quiet. He needs to feel this. Claire shifts uncomfortably, her arms tightening around Samuel. The baby's fussing now, tugging at her necklace, and she looks like she wants to bolt. But then she speaks, and her voice is softer than I've ever heard it. Maggie, we were wrong. I was wrong. I thought you were just... She stops, searching for words. A regular mom. But this painting, it's beautiful. And I'm sorry. I look at her, really look at her, and see something I didn't expect: shame. Claire's always been polished, sharp-tongued, the kind of woman who'd rather die than admit she's wrong. But here she is, standing in a crowd of strangers, saying sorry. It's not enough. Not yet, but it's a start. Thank you. Claire, I say, keeping my voice even. I forgive you, but from now on, I want to be respected not just as Ben's mom, but as Maggie, a person with her own life. Ben nods, swallowing hard. I get it. Mom, I do. I've been a lousy son, and I want to make it right. Samuel lets out a little squeal, reaching for me, and I can't help but smile. I hold out my arms, and Claire hesitates before handing him over. He's heavier than I expected. all chubby cheeks and curious eyes. And for a moment, I'm back in that kitchen, holding baby Ben. But I'm not that woman anymore. I'm someone new, someone who's learned to love herself as much as she loves her family. The crowd's moving around us, oblivious to the weight of this moment. The bluegrass band strikes up a new tune, and the smell of apple fritters wafts over from a nearby booth. I hand Samuel back to Claire, and she meets my eyes, something like gratitude flickering there. "We'll talk soon." "Maggie," she says, and I believe her, as they walk away. Ben turns back once, giving me a look that says he's not done trying. I watch them disappear into the sea of flannel and denim, and I feel the sun on my face, warm and forgiving. This is my moment, my victory, not because I've won some fight, but because I've found my light again. I turn back to my painting, tracing the edges of the canvas with my fingers. A year ago, I was a different woman, one who thought her worth lay in what she could give others. Back then, I'd have crumbled under Ben and Claire's words, let them convince me I was nothing without them. But a letter from Dr. Robert Langley, my old boss, changed everything. He left me $1.2 million, not a fortune by some folks' standards, but enough to buy a little house by the Willamette River, to sign up for a painting class, to start living for me. That money wasn't the real gift, though the real gift was his belief in me, his reminder that I deserved more than a life of sacrifice. I'm not saying it was easy. There were nights I cried, wondering if I'd lost Ben for good. There were days I doubted myself, thinking maybe I was selfish for wanting more. But standing here, with my painting on display and my heart full, I know I made the right choice. This is my story, and it's one worth telling from the beginning. The fair's in full swing now, and Susan's calling me over to her booth, waving a cup of cider like it's a trophy. I laugh, feeling lighter than I have in years. Willow Creek's got a way of making you feel at home, with its river sparkling under the sun and its people who know your name. I'm Maggie Walsh, and I'm just getting started. If this moment, this story of finding my light tugs at your heart, I'd love for you to stick around. Hit that subscribe button to follow the rest of my journey, and drop a comment below. Tell me, have you ever stood up for yourself and found your own glow? I'm all ears. And I can't wait to hear your story. I can still smell the coffee from those nights, bitter, cheap stuff that came in a dented can from the corner store. It was the kind that kept you awake but didn't taste like much. Perfect for a single mom working 3 jobs and trying to keep the lights on. Back in the late 80s, when Ben was just a scrawny kid with a mop of dark hair and dreams bigger than our tiny apartment, that coffee was my lifeline. I'd sit under the kitchen light, the one with the cracked yellow shade, stitching up his jeans or balancing the checkbook while the radio played Reba McEntire low enough not to wake him. Those nights were long, but they were mine. And in a funny way, they're what got me to where I am now, standing in the glow of my own making at the Willow Creek Art Fair. I'm Maggie Walsh, 66 years old, and if you'd told me a year ago I'd be showing a painting at the fair, I'd have laughed until I cried. Back then, I was just Ben's mom, the lady who answered phones at Dr. Robert Langley's clinic, the one who wore the same winter coat for a decade so her son could go to baseball camp. But to understand how I got here, how I found my way back to myself, you've got to know where I started. So let me take you back to Willow Creek in the 80s, to the nights when the kitchen light was my only company, and the weight of the world felt like it was all on me. Willow Creek back then wasn't much different from now, just a little sleepier. The Willamette River still ran through town, lazy and steady, and the sycamores still turned gold come fall. But the streets were quieter, with mom and pop shops instead of the coffee chains you see today, and folks knew each other's business whether they liked it or not. My apartment was on the edge of town, a 1-bedroom walk-up with peeling linoleum and a radiator that hissed like an angry cat. The kitchen was barely big enough for a table, but it was where I lived my real life. That's where I'd sit after Ben went to bed, sewing patches on his clothes or counting pennies to make sure we'd have enough for groceries. Ben was 5 when his dad left. I don't talk about that much water under the bridge, as folks say around here, but when he walked out, he took half my heart and all our savings, leaving me with a kid who needed more than I could give. I was 26, scared out of my mind, but I figured out quick that love wasn't enough to keep a roof over our heads. So I took a job at Dr. Langley's clinic, answering phones, scheduling appointments, and keeping the place running smooth. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and Dr. Langley was the kind of boss who made you feel seen. I remember the first time he caught me at the clinic after hours. It was 1985, and Ben had just started kindergarten. I was staying late to file charts, trying to earn a little overtime. The office smelled of antiseptic and old coffee, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I was so tired I didn't hear Dr. Langley come in until he spoke. "Maggie," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "you're going to wear yourself out. Go home to that boy of yours." I looked up, embarrassed, my hands full of papers. "I'm fine. Dr. Langley, just need to finish these." He leaned against the doorframe, his white coat rumpled from a long day. He was in his 50s then, with kind eyes and a smile that made patients trust him. "You're the heart of this place, you know that, but you've got to take care of yourself too." I waved him off, but his words stuck with me. Nobody had called me the heart of anything before. Most days, I felt like a machine, churning through tasks to keep Ben fed and clothed. But Dr. Langley saw me, and over the years, that meant more than I can say. Ben was my world back then. He was a good kid, always drawing pictures of spaceships or begging to play catch in the parking lot. I'd watch him sleep sometimes, his little chest rising and falling, and I'd promise him the moon. "You're going to have everything." "Ben," I'd whisper, "college, a big house, all of it." I meant it, too. I worked double shifts at the clinic, took weekend gigs cleaning houses, even sold Avon for a while. Every dollar went to Ben's school supplies, baseball cleats, a used computer when he got into high school. I didn't mind. That's what mothers do. Right, one night stands out, clear as day. It was 1990 and Ben was 10. He'd come home from school with a flyer for a summer baseball camp, his eyes shining like I'd never seen. "Mom, can I go please? It's only $200. Only, that was 2 weeks' groceries, a month's electric bill." But I looked at his face, so full of hope, and I couldn't say no. "Okay, buddy," I said, ruffling his hair. "We'll figure it out." That night, under the kitchen light, I sat with my sewing kit, patching his jacket for the 3rd time that year. The radio was playing Fancy, and I hummed along, trying to ignore the ache in my hands. I'd picked up extra shifts at the clinic to cover the camp, which meant less sleep, less time with Ben. But when I saw him run onto that field a few months later, grinning ear to ear, it was worth every stitch, every sleepless night. Dr. Langley noticed the toll it took. One morning, he called me into his office. The room was cozy, with a wooden desk and a window overlooking the river. He handed me a cup of coffee, real coffee, not the instant junk I drank at home. "Maggie," he said, "you're killing yourself for that boy. He's lucky to have you. But what about you?" "What do you want?" I laughed, a tired sound. "I want Ben to have a good life." "That's enough," he shook his head. "It's not. You've got dreams. Maggie, I see that sketchbook you keep under the front desk. You're an artist. Don't let that go." I blushed, thinking of the pencil drawings I'd scribbled during lunch breaks, rivers, trees, Ben's sleeping face. "That's just doodling." "Dr. Langley doesn't pay the bills." "Maybe not," he said, "but it feeds your soul. Promise me you'll make time for it." I promised, but I didn't keep it. Dreams were a luxury, and I was too busy surviving. Dr. Langley never pushed, but he'd slip me little kindnesses, a bonus at Christmas, a day off when Ben was sick. When his wife died in '95, I saw him break, and I stayed late to listen, pouring coffee and letting him talk about her. We became friends, I suppose, though I never thought of it that way. He was my boss, my rock, and I was his right hand. The years rolled on, and Ben grew up. He got into college, a good one in Portland, and I paid for it in cash. Piecing together every cent from my jobs, I moved to a smaller apartment to save money, wore second-hand clothes, skipped vacations. When he graduated debt-free, I cried harder than I did at his high school graduation. I'd done it. I'd given him everything. Then he met Claire. She was from Crestwood, the fancy part of town where folks drove BMWs and threw charity galas. She was beautiful, polished, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I was thrilled for Ben. He'd landed a girl who seemed like she'd stepped out of a magazine. But at their wedding in 2015, I felt the first sting of something off. Claire's mother, Evelyn, looked me up and down, her lips twitching at my department store dress. "You must be so proud of Benjamin," she said, her voice dripping with something I couldn't name. "Working as a receptionist all those years to get him here." I nodded, ignoring the jab. "I am. He's a good man." Claire was kinder that day, but over time, her true colors showed. She'd make little comments about my job, my clothes, my simple life. "Maggie, you should try something more fulfilling," she'd say, like answering phones for 30 years was nothing. Ben never corrected her, and that hurt worse than her words. He'd just look away, like he was ashamed of me. I swallowed it, though. For Ben, I always did. When they bought their big house in Crestwood, I helped with the down payment, dipping into my savings. "It's got a guest room for you, Mom," Ben said, beaming, "for when you retire." I cried that night, thinking maybe I'd done something right after all. But then Dr. Langley died. It was sudden, a heart attack in his sleep, just before Christmas 2023. I was at his funeral, standing in the back of the church, feeling like the ground had dropped out from under me. He wasn't just my boss. He was the one person who'd seen me, really seen me, through all those years. The clinic closed soon after, and I was out of a job, facing retirement with a pension that wouldn't stretch far. I was 65, tired, and wondering what I had left to show for my life. That's when the call came from Thomas Grayson, Dr. Langley's lawyer. I sat in his office a week later, the Willamette River glinting through the window, and listened as he slid a document across his oak desk. "Maggie," he said, "Dr. Langley left you $1.2 million, the proceeds from the clinic sale, and part of his personal estate." I stared at him, my hands shaking. "Why me?" Thomas handed me a letter, written in Dr. Langley's familiar scrawl. "My dear Maggie," it began, "you've been the heart of my practice for 30 years, and more than that, a friend who carried me through my darkest days. This isn't charity, it's what you've earned. Live, Maggie, really live." I folded the letter, tears blurring my vision, and tucked it into my purse. I didn't tell Ben or Claire, not right away. I needed time to sit with it, to figure out who I was without a job, without a son to raise. That money was a lifeline, but it was also a mirror showing me how much I'd given up. And as I sat under my kitchen light that night, the same one I'd sown under all those years, I made a promise to myself I was going to find Maggie again, the woman I'd buried under a lifetime of sacrifice. The smell of apple cider still lingers in my mind when I think back to that Sunday dinner at Ben and Claire's house. It was October 2024, and the leaves outside their Crestwood home were turning the kind of red and gold that makes you want to cozy up with a sweater and a hot drink. I'd brought a bottle of sparkling cider from the market in Willow Creek. a little gift to celebrate the news that Claire was expecting. My heart was full, thinking about a grandbaby, about finally resting after 30 years of running myself ragged for Ben. I was 65, newly retired, and ready to be part of their family in a new way. But that night, under the bright lights of their fancy kitchen, I learned a hard truth: sometimes the people you love most are the ones who see you the least. I'm Maggie Walsh, and if you've been following my story, you know I've spent most of my life under a kitchen light, stitching together a future for my son Ben. You know about Dr. Robert Langley, my boss and friend, who left me $1.2 million when he passed a gift that turned my world upside down. Standing at the Willow Creek Art Fair a year later, with my painting under the kitchen light hanging proud, I can still feel the sting of that night at Ben's. It was the moment I realized I'd been forgotten, not just as a mother, but as a person. And it was the moment I started to fight for myself. Ben and Claire's house in Crestwood was like something out of a magazine. The kind of place where everything's polished hardwood floors that gleamed, stainless steel appliances that probably cost more than my old car, and a dining table big enough for a dozen guests. But it was cold, too, in a way that had nothing to do with the crisp fall air. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and garlic from the roast Claire was making, but there was no warmth in the way she looked at me when I walked in, clutching my bottle of cider like it was a peace offering. "Hi, Maggie," Claire said, her voice smooth as silk but sharp underneath. She was wearing a tailored blouse, her blonde hair pulled back tight, and her hand rested on her barely there baby bump. "You didn't have to bring anything. We've got plenty." "Oh, it's just a little something," I said, setting the cider on the counter. "To celebrate the baby. I'm so happy for you both." Ben came in from the living room, giving me a quick hug. He looked tired, his dark hair a little messy, but he smiled. "Thanks, Mom. It's going to be wild. Being a dad." I beamed at him, my heart swelling. "You'll be a great one, Ben. And I'm here to help. You know, with the baby, whatever you need." That's when I decided to share my news. I'd been mulling it over for days, nervous but hopeful. "Speaking of changes," I said, my voice a little shaky, "I'm retiring. The clinic's closed now, with Dr. Langley gone, and I'm ready to take it easy. Maybe spend more time with you all, help with the little one." There was a beat of silence, the kind that makes your stomach drop. Claire's smile froze, and she exchanged a glance with Ben. He cleared his throat, rubbing the back of his neck, a habit he's had since he was a kid. "When he's uncomfortable. Retiring," Claire said, her tone like she was repeating a foreign word. "What are you going to live on?" "Maggie's Social Security." "That's not much these days." Her words hit like a slap, but I kept my face steady. "I've saved some," I said, which was true. Though I didn't mention Dr. Langley's inheritance, I wasn't ready to share that yet, not until I'd figured out what it meant for me. Ben shifted in his chair, not meeting my eyes. "Mom, Claire's just worried about you. Retirement's great, but maybe you could pick up something part-time, you know, to keep busy. Part-time at 65. After 30 years of working my fingers to the bone so he could have the life he's got, I felt something crack inside me, but I swallowed it down, like I always did. "I've been busy my whole life. Ben," I said quietly. "I was hoping to rest, maybe be around for my grandbaby." Claire set a platter of roast on the table, her movements brisk. "Rest is fine. But you've got to be practical. Maggie, babies are expensive, and we're already stretching to get the nursery ready. You don't want to be a burden, do you?" "A burden." The word hung in the air, heavy as the cast iron skillet on the stove. I looked at Ben, waiting for him to say something, anything, to defend me, but he just stared at his plate, like the answers were in the mashed potatoes. I'd given him everything: college, this house, a life without debt, and now I was a burden. I've never been a burden, I said, my voice firmer than I felt, and I don't plan to start now. Dinner went on, but the food tasted like ash. Claire kept up her polite chatter, talking about baby names and decorating plans, while Ben nodded along. I excused myself early, claiming a headache, and drove back to my apartment in Willow Creek. The river glinting dark under the streetlights. That night, under my own kitchen light, I sat with a cup of tea and let the tears come. I'd spent my life building a bridge to my son, and he'd burned it down without a second thought. A week later, everything changed. I got a call from Thomas Grayson, Dr. Langley's lawyer, asking me to come to his office. I drove across town, the Willamette River sparkling under a grey October sky, and sat in a wood-panelled room that smelled of leather and old books. Thomas, a wiry man with a kind smile, slid a document across his oak desk. "Maggie," he said, "Dr. Langley left you $1.2 million. It's from the sale of the clinic and a portion of his personal estate." I stared at the paper, the numbers blurring. "There's got to be a mistake," I whispered. "Why me?" Thomas handed me a letter. The paper creased from being folded and unfolded. Dr. Langley's handwriting was shaky but clear. "My dear Maggie," it read, "you've been the heart of my practice for 30 years, and more than that, a friend who carried me through my darkest days. This isn't charity, it's what you've earned. Live, Maggie, really live." I read it 3 times. Tears dripping onto the page. Dr. Langley had no family, no kids or siblings to leave his money to, but I never dreamed he'd choose me. I thought of the nights we'd talked after hours, when I'd listened to him grieve his wife or share stories of his childhood in Portland. I'd been his friend, his confidant, and he'd seen me in a way no one else had. "What do I do with this?" I asked Thomas, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled. "Whatever you want, Maggie, it's yours." I didn't tell Ben or Claire. Not yet. I needed time to sit with it, to understand what it meant to have a future I hadn't planned for. I drove home, the letter tucked in my purse, and sat under my kitchen light, staring at the bank app on my phone. The string of zeros felt like a dream, one I was afraid to wake up from. I decided to start small. I'd find a new place to live, somewhere with light and space, somewhere that felt like mine. I called a realtor the next day, a woman named Jessica Morgan, and told her I wanted a house by the river, something peaceful, under $1 million. She didn't blink, just said, "I've got just the place." The house was in Riverbend Heights, a quiet neighborhood where the Willamette flowed gentle and the lawns were dotted with sycamores. It was a Cape Cod-style cottage, with big windows and a wraparound porch, the kind of place I'd only ever dreamed of. I walked through it, the hardwood floors creaking under my feet, and felt something I hadn't in years' hope. I made an offer that day, full price, and the sellers accepted. "A cash deal," Jessica said. "Would close fast. I was moving in by November. I kept it quiet, not because I wanted to hide, but because I wasn't ready for Ben and Claire's questions. I wanted to build this new life on my terms, not theirs. But secrets don't stay secret in Willow Creek. A week after I signed the papers, Ben showed up at my apartment, his truck parked crooked in the lot. He didn't knock, just stood in the doorway, his face a mix of confusion and something sharper. "Mom," he said, "Mrs. Carter from church said you bought a house in Riverbend Heights. Is that true?" I nodded, setting down my coffee mug. "It is. I'm moving next week." He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes narrowing. "How you just retired? You said you had some savings, but a house like that, what's going on?" I could have told him about Dr. Langley then, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way he was looking at me, like I owed him an explanation. "I've managed," I said simply. "It's my business. Ben, your business." His voice rose, and I saw Claire's influence in the way he squared his shoulders. "I'm your son, Mom. If you've got money, why didn't you tell us Claire and I are stretched thin with the baby coming? We could use some help." There it was, the expectation that my life was still theirs to claim. I felt a spark of anger, but I kept my voice steady. "Ben, I've helped you my whole life. I paid for your college, your wedding, the down payment on your house. I'm done being your bank. I'm living for me now." He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Living for you. What does that even mean? You're 65. Mom, you can't just start over." I stood up, my hands trembling but my resolve firm. "I can, and I am. If you can't respect that, we need some space." He left without another word, the door slamming behind him. I sank into my chair, the kitchen light casting shadows on the walls. I'd spent 30 years building a life for Ben, and now he saw me as nothing but a resource. But Dr. Langley's letter was still in my purse, his words echoing in my mind. "Live, Maggie, really live." A few days later, Claire called. I was packing boxes for the move, the apartment smelling of cardboard and dust. Her voice was all sugar, but I knew better. "Maggie," she said, "Ben told me about the house. That's wonderful, but, living alone at your age can be tough. There's a senior community just outside town, nice place, affordable. You could save money, maybe help us out with the baby's expenses." I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. A senior community. She wasn't even pretending to care. "Thanks for the suggestion, Claire," I said, my voice cool. "But I've got my own plans." I hung up before she could reply. That night, I drove to the community center in Willow Creek, a low brick building with flyers for book clubs and yoga classes pinned to the bulletin board. I'd seen a sign for a painting class, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. The room smelled of turpentine and possibility, and as I signed my name on the roster, I felt a flicker of something new. Maybe it was hope, maybe it was defiance. Either way, I was ready to start painting my own life. There's something about the Willamette River that makes you feel like you're part of something bigger. In the early mornings, when the mist hangs low and the water catches the first light, it's like the river's whispering secrets it's kept for centuries. I'd stand on the porch of my new house in Riverbend Heights, a mug of coffee warming my hands, and watch the current flow, steady and sure. It reminded me of myself, in a way always moving, even when I felt stuck. Those mornings became my sanctuary after I moved in, a quiet space to figure out who Maggie Walsh could be when she wasn't just Ben's mom or Dr. Langley's receptionist. And it was in that quiet that I started to paint again, brushing color onto canvas, like I was rediscovering a language I'd forgotten. I'm Maggie Walsh, 66 years old, and if you've been with me so far, you know how I got here from the long nights under my old kitchen light, stitching clothes for my son Ben, to the sting of being called a burden by him and his wife, Claire. You know about the $1.2 million Dr. Robert Langley left me, a gift that gave me a house by the river and a chance to start over. Standing at the Willow Creek Art Fair with my painting under the kitchen light on display, I can look back and see how those first months in my new home changed me. They weren't easy, full of doubts and guilt, but they led me to a community, a passion, and a strength I didn't know I had. Moving into Riverbend Heights felt like stepping into someone else's life. The house was everything my old apartment wasn't spacious, with big windows that let in the kind of light that makes you want to linger. The living room smelled of fresh paint, and the hardwood floors creaked just right under my feet. I'd walk out to the porch each morning, the air crisp with the scent of damp earth and sycamore leaves, and listened to the river's gentle hum. It was mine, paid for with Dr. Langley's gift, and, for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. But belonging to a place is one thing, belonging to yourself is another. I'd spent so long being Ben's mom that I wasn't sure who Maggie was anymore. That's why I signed up for the painting class at the Willow Creek Community Center. I'd seen the flyer pinned to the bulletin board, its edges curling from the damp November air. And something in me said, why not Dr. Langley had always liked my sketches? The ones I'd doodled during lunch breaks at the clinic rivers, trees, Ben's face when he was asleep. Maybe it was time to see if I still had it in me. The community center was a low brick building with a parking lot full of pickup trucks and minivans. Inside, the painting classroom smelled of turpentine and cedar, with easels lined up like soldiers and windows letting in the grey light of an Oregon winter. The first day, I felt out of place, my sensible shoes and cardigan a stark contrast to the younger folks in their paint-splattered jeans. But then I met Susan Keller, a retired nurse who'd worked at Dr. Langley's clinic years ago, and Henry Brooks, a former teacher with a tweed cap and a laugh that filled the room. Susan was about my age, with short grey hair and eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "Maggie Walsh," she said, shaking my hand like we were old friends. "I remember you from the clinic. You kept that place running like a Swiss watch." I blushed, setting up my easel. Just did my job. "Susan, don't sell yourself short," she said, her voice firm. "Dr. Langley always said you were the best thing about that place." Henry chimed in, adjusting his cap. "And now you're an artist. Welcome to the club. Maggie." Their warmth caught me off guard, like a hug you didn't know you needed. Over the next few weeks, the class became my refuge. We'd paint still life's apples, vases, folded cloths, while Susan told stories about her days as a nurse, fighting to be taken seriously in a man's world. Henry shared poems he'd written but never shown anyone, his voice soft with the pain of losing touch with his kids after a divorce. They weren't just classmates, they were proof that you could start over, even when life had worn you down. Painting was harder than I remembered. My hands, stiff from years of typing and sewing, fumbled with the brushes, and my colours came out muddy. I'd stare at the canvas, frustrated, thinking of the sketches I'd made in my 20s, back when I dreamed of being an artist. "I'm too old for this," I muttered one day. Tossing my brush down, Susan overheard, her own canvas covered in bold blues. "Too old, Maggie. You're 65, not dead." "Look at me, I started a painting at 60. You've got talent. Don't let it go to waste." Henry nodded, cleaning his glasses. "She's right. You've got a story in those hands. Let it out." Their words stayed with me, and I kept at it, painting scenes from memory: my old kitchen, the river at dawn, Ben's baseball glove. One painting stood out under the kitchen light. It showed my apartment kitchen, the yellow bulb casting a warm glow over the table where I'd sewn Ben's clothes. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and when I finished, Susan clapped like I'd won a prize. "You're entering this in the art fair," she said, not asking. "It's in April, and it's a big deal around here. Folks come from all over." I laughed. Nervous. Who'd want to see my painting? I'm just a beginner. Henry raised an eyebrow. "Maggie, I've seen what passes for art at that fair. You're better than half the folks there. Besides, it's not about winning. It's about showing up." I wasn't convinced, but I promised to think about it. The idea of my painting hanging where anyone could see it made my stomach twist. What if people laughed? What if Ben and Claire found out and thought I was being foolish? But deep down, I wanted to prove to myself that I was more than the woman they'd dismissed. Life in Riverbend Heights settled into a rhythm. I'd wake early, make coffee, and sit on the porch, watching the river. I'd spend afternoons painting or tending the little garden I'd started, planting daffodils and lavender. The house was coming together: new curtains, a plush sofa, a dining table I'd found at a flea market. It felt like home, but it was lonely. 2. I missed Ben, even after everything. I'd catch myself wondering how he was, if Claire was feeling okay with the pregnancy, a couple of times. I drove to the store and bought little things for the baby: a stuffed bunny, a tiny pair of socks, and mailed them anonymously. I wasn't ready to talk to Ben, but I couldn't stop being his mom. Then the email came. It was late January, and I was in my kitchen, the new one with white cabinets and a window overlooking the river. The light was on, soft and warm, and I was sipping tea when my phone pinged. It was from Ben, the first contact since our fight at my apartment. Mom. It read, "I'm sorry about how things went. I was stressed, and I shouldn't have pushed you. Claire and I are struggling with bills, and I got caught up in it. Can we talk? Maybe I could come by. I want to make this right, but we could really use some help." I read it twice, my heart sinking. He was sorry, sure, but it was the same old song, "Help Us." Mom. I sat there, the tea going cold, and thought about Dr. Langley's letter, his plea for me to live. Ben wasn't asking for me. He was asking for my money. I didn't reply. Not that night. I needed to hold on to the Maggie I was becoming, not slip back into being his safety net. The next week, at painting class, I told Susan and Henry about the email. We were cleaning brushes, the room quiet except for the hum of the heater. Susan shook her head, her hands wrist deep in soapy water. "He's your son, Maggie, but that doesn't mean he gets to treat you like an ATM," she said. "You've given him enough. Let him figure this out." Henry looked up from his canvas, his eyes kind but serious. I lost my kids because I didn't set boundaries, kept bailing them out, thinking it was love. It wasn't. It was enabling. "You're doing the right thing, keeping your distance." Their words hit home, but they didn't erase the guilt. I loved Ben, always would, but I was tired of being needed only when it suited him. I went home and painted, pouring my frustration into the canvas. Under the kitchen light took shape, each brushstroke a piece of my story: nights of sacrifice, years of being invisible, and now, a flicker of defiance. By March, Susan was relentless about the art fair. "Maggie, you're entering that painting, or I'm doing it for you," she said. Hands on her hips. "It's too good to stay in your garage." I laughed, but I was scared. What if it's terrible? What if people think I'm some old lady playing at being an artist? Henry chuckled, adjusting his cap. "Then they're fools. You've got more heart in one painting than most folks have in a lifetime. Besides, I'm entering my poems. If I can do it, you can." Their faith in me was like a warm blanket, and I finally agreed. I filled out the entry form, my hands shaking, and dropped it off at the community center. The fair was a month away, and I spent every spare moment tweaking the painting, adding details to the light, the table, the memory. It felt like I was telling my story to the world, and that was both terrifying and exhilarating. One evening, as I stood on my porch, watching the river turn silver under the moon, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to enter the fair, I was going to show up as Maggie Walsh, not Ben's mom or anyone's burden. I'd spent too long in the shadows, and it was time to step into the light. The kitchen in my Riverbend Heights house has become my haven. It's not big, but it's bright. With white cabinets, a farmhouse sink, and a window that frames the Willamette River like a painting. At night, when I turn on the pendant light over the island, it casts a warm glow, softer than the harsh bulb in my old apartment, but just as comforting. I've spent hours there, sipping tea, sketching, or just listening to the river's quiet song. It's where I go to think, to feel, to remind myself that I'm Maggie Walsh, not just Ben's mom or Claire's burden. And it's where I was sitting, one chilly March evening in 2025, when everything came to a head, the truth about my son, my daughter-in-law, and the woman I'd become. I'm 66 now, and if you followed my story, you know the road I've traveled. From the long nights sewing under my old kitchen light to keep Ben fed and clothed, to the sting of his and Claire's dismissal when I retired, to the $1.2 million doctor. Robert Langley left me, giving me a new home and a new start. You've seen me find my way to a painting class, to friends like Susan and Henry, to a canvas that holds my heart under the kitchen light, set to hang at the Willow Creek art fair. But before that fair, before Ben and Claire stood before my painting and saw me for the first time, there was a reckoning. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was real, and it changed us all. March in Willow Creek is a moody affair. The river runs high from spring rains, and the air smells of wet earth and budding lilacs. I'd settled into my new life, painting most days, tending my garden, and leaning on Susan and Henry for the kind of friendship that feels like family. But Ben and Claire were never far from my mind. I'd ignored Ben's email from January, the one where he'd apologized but still asked for money. I'd sent a few more anonymous gifts for their baby, a knit blanket, a board book because I couldn't help myself. But I kept my distance, holding tight to the boundaries I'd set, even when guilt gnawed at me. Then, one rainy afternoon, my phone rang. I was in the kitchen, mixing paint for a new canvas, the room smelling of turpentine and the oatmeal cookies I'd baked earlier. The screen showed Claire's name, and I froze. We hadn't spoken since her call in January, when she'd suggested I move to a senior home to save money for them. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. Maggie Claire's voice was different, less polished, almost shaky. "I hope I'm not bothering you." I set down my brush, wiping my hands on a rag. "You're not. What's going on?" "Claire." There was a pause, and I heard a baby fussing in the background. Samuel must have been born. I realized, my heart twisting. "I need advice," she said, "about being a mom. My mother's driving me crazy, and I don't know who else to talk to." I was stunned. Claire, the woman who'd treated me like a nuisance, was asking for my help. I leaned against the counter, the light above me casting soft shadows. "What's Evelyn doing?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "She's always here," Claire said, her voice tight, telling me how to feed Sam, how to dress him, how our house isn't up to standard. I'm exhausted, and Ben's working late all the time. I thought I could handle it. But how did you do it? Maggie raising Ben alone. Her question hit me like a wave, stirring memories of those long nights under my old kitchen light sewing, budgeting, crying when I thought Ben couldn't hear. I wanted to snap, to remind her how she'd dismissed me. But I heard the desperation in her voice, so I told her the truth. It was hard, I said. I worked 3 jobs, skipped meals, gave up dreams, but I loved Ben, and that kept me going. You've got to find your own strength, Claire, and not let Evelyn run your life. You're Sam's mom, not her. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "You're stronger than I thought." "Maggie, I'm sorry I didn't see that before. It wasn't a full apology, but it was something. I didn't push. You'll figure it out," I said. "Just trust yourself." After we hung up, I sat there, staring at the river through the window. Claire's call had shaken me. Not because she'd asked for advice, but because it showed a crack in her armor. She wasn't just the cold, status-obsessed woman I'd thought. She was struggling. And for the first time, I saw her as a person, not just my daughter-in-law. A week later, Ben showed up at my door. It was a Saturday morning, the sky clear and the river sparkling. I was in the garden, planting tulip bulbs, when I heard his truck pull into the driveway. He stepped out, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, his face lined with something heavier than exhaustion. I stood, brushing dirt from my hands, and met him on the porch. "Mom," he said, his voice low. "Can we talk?" I nodded, leading him inside. The kitchen smelled of coffee and the cookies I'd left on the counter. I poured us both a mug, and we sat at the island, the light above us warm and steady. Ben looked around, taking in the house, the open windows, the sketches pinned to a corkboard, the vase of daffodils on the table. "This place is nice," he said. "Really nice. I'm happy for you." "Thank you," I said, waiting. I knew he hadn't come just to compliment my decor. He took a deep breath, his hands wrapped around the mug. "I owe you an apology. Mom, a real one. I've been a jerk, and not just about the house. About everything." I raised an eyebrow, keeping my expression neutral. "Go on." He looked down, his jaw tight. "I found out about Dr. Langley's inheritance. Not from you, Mrs. Carter at church mentioned it. I got mad, thinking you were hiding it from me, so I called his lawyer, Thomas Grayson, asked if the will was legit, if there was any way to challenge it." My heart stopped. "You tried to challenge Dr. Langley's will?" He flinched, meeting my eyes. "I didn't go through with it. Mom, I stopped after one call, but I'm ashamed I even thought about it. I was stressed, bills, the baby, Claire's mom breathing down our necks. I told myself I deserved a piece of that money, that you owed me, but I was wrong, so wrong. I sat there, the weight of his words sinking in. My own son, the boy I'd raised with every ounce of my strength, had tried to take what Dr. Langley gave me. It hurt, deeper than I could say. But I saw the shame in his eyes, the way his hands trembled. He wasn't proud of it. "Why, Ben?" I asked, my voice steady but sharp. "Why would you think I owed you anything after all I've given?" He shook his head, tears brimming. "I don't know. I've been so caught up in keeping up with Claire's family, proving I'm good enough. I forgot what you did for me, college, the house, everything. I forgot you're a person, not just my mom." His words cracked something open in me, a mix of pain and relief. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him it was okay, but I held back. I'd spent too long smoothing things over. "Ben," I said, "I love you, always will, but I'm done being your safety net. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be based on respect for me as a person, not just as your mother." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "I get it. I want to make it right. Mom, I don't know how, but I want to try." I studied him, seeing the boy he'd been in the man before me. "Start by being honest," I said, "and give it time. Trust takes a while to rebuild." He left soon after, promising to call. I stood on the porch, watching his truck disappear down the road, the river glinting under the morning sun. I felt lighter, but not whole, not yet. Ben's apology was a start, but words weren't enough. I needed to see him change. A few days later, Claire invited me to their house in Crestwood. I was hesitant, but Susan convinced me to go. Give her a chance. "Maggie," she said at painting class, her hands covered in blue paint. "People can surprise you." I drove to Crestwood on a rainy afternoon, the wipers slapping against my windshield. Their house was as pristine as ever, but inside, it was chaos toys scattered on the floor, a pile of dishes in the sink, and Samuel wailing in his crib. Claire looked frazzled, her hair in a messy bun, no trace of her usual polish. "Thanks for coming." "Maggie," she said, leading me to the living room. "I know things have been tense." I nodded, sitting on the couch. "They have, but I'm here." She took a deep breath, rocking Samuel as he settled. "I've been awful to you. I thought you were, I don't know, just Ben's mom, someone who didn't matter. But after talking to you, seeing how you raised Ben alone, I realized I was wrong. I've been so caught up in my mom's expectations, trying to be perfect. I took it out on you, and I'm sorry." Her apology was raw, unpolished, and I believed her. "Thank you, Claire," I said. "I appreciate that, but I need you to see me as more than a means to an end. I'm not here to fix your problems or fund your life." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I know. I want you in Sam's life, Maggie not as a babysitter, but as his grandma. If you're willing." I looked at Samuel, his chubby face peaceful now, and felt a warmth I hadn't expected. "I'd like that," I said. "But we take it slow." We talked for a while, about motherhood, about the pressures she faced. I saw a side of Claire I hadn't before, a woman trying to find her way, just like I was. When I left, the rain had stopped, and the sky was clearing, the river reflecting patches of blue. I drove home, the kitchen light waiting for me, and felt a shift. The truth was out, and it was messy, but it was a start. The art fair was a month away, and I threw myself into preparing under the kitchen light. I added details, a worn table edge, a shadow of my hand sewing, making it a piece of my soul. Susan and Henry were my cheerleaders, their encouragement a lifeline. One evening, as I stood in my garden, the tulips just starting to bud, I thought about Ben and Claire. They'd apologized, but I wasn't ready to let them back in fully. Not until I stood at that fair, my painting on display, and proved to myself, and maybe to them, that I was more than they'd ever seen. The Willamette River has a way of teaching you patience. It flows steady, never rushing, carving its path through Willow Creek with a quiet strength that doesn't need to shout to be noticed. I've spent countless mornings on my porch in Riverbend Heights, watching it glint under the sun or shimmer in the moonlight. And it's taught me something: life keeps moving, even when you think you're stuck. A year ago, I was a woman who thought her worth lay in what she could give others: my son Ben, my daughter-in-law Claire, anyone but myself. But standing at the Willow Creek Art Fair, with my painting under the kitchen light hanging proud, I know I've found my own current, my own freedom. This is the story of how I got there, and how I learned that love, real love, starts with yourself. I'm Maggie Walsh, 66 years old, and if you've walked this road with me, you know the weight of my journey. From the nights under my old kitchen light, sewing patches on Ben's clothes to give him a better life, to the pain of being called a burden when I retired, to the $1.2 million Dr. Robert Langley left me. A gift that opened a door to a new beginning. You've seen me find solace in a painting class, in friends like Susan Keller and Henry Brooks, and in a canvas that held my heart. You've watched me face Ben and Claire, demanding respect not just as a mother, but as a person. Now, as I stand in the glow of that art fair, I want to take you back to that moment and beyond to show you how we healed, not by forgetting the past, but by building something new. The Willow Creek Art Fair. That April day in 2025 was a turning point. I can still see it, the fairgrounds alive with the hum of neighbors, the smell of apple fritters and wood smoke, the bluegrass band playing a lively tune. My painting, under the kitchen light, hung in the community center, its warm glow capturing the kitchen where I'd spent decades sacrificing for Ben. The card beside it read, "Dedicated to the long nights, the silent sacrifices, and the light that never goes out." I was nervous, my beige sweater feeling too warm under the spring sun. But Susan and Henry were there, their smiles like anchors. Then Ben and Claire arrived, little Samuel in Claire's arms. I'd braced myself for their reaction, expecting indifference or worse. But when they stopped before my painting, Reading the card, something shifted. Ben's voice cracked as he said, "Mom, I didn't know you did all that. Claire." Her eyes wet. Admitted. "I was wrong, Maggie. I thought you were just a regular mom." I stood tall, my heart pounding, and told them, "I forgive you, but I want to be respected not just as Ben's mom, but as Maggie." That moment wasn't just about their apologies. It was about me claiming my place, not as a resource or a relic, but as a woman with a story worth telling. The crowd moved around us, oblivious to the weight of it all, and as Ben and Claire walked away, I felt the sun on my face, warm and forgiving. My painting didn't win any prizes that day, but it sold to a woman from Portland who said it reminded her of her own mother's kitchen. I used the money to buy a new set of watercolors, a small act of faith in the artist I was becoming. The weeks after the fair were a slow dance of rebuilding. Ben called regularly, not asking for money, but sharing updates about Samuel, his first tooth, his love for splashing in puddles. Claire invited me to Crestwood for coffee, and I went, cautious but open. Their house was still grand, with its hardwood floors and high ceilings, but it felt warmer now, cluttered with baby toys and the chaos of new parenthood. Claire was different, too less polished, more human. She'd started standing up to her mother, Evelyn, setting boundaries that made her life messier but truer. One afternoon, as we sat in the living room, Samuel napping upstairs, Claire handed me a mug of tea and said, "Maggie, I've been thinking about what you said at the fair, about being respected as a person. I want that for us, for you, me, Ben, Sam. I'm trying, but I know I've got a ways to go." I sipped my tea, the steam curling in the air. "You're doing better than you think. Claire, it's not about being perfect, it's about showing up." She smiled, a real smile, and for the first time, I saw the woman she could be, not Evelyn's daughter, not Ben's wife, but Claire. "I want Sam to know you," she said, "not just as his grandma, but as the woman who painted that kitchen, the one who didn't give up." Her words warmed me, like the light in my kitchen. "I'd like that," I said. "Let's take it one day at a time." Ben was trying too. He'd started therapy, something I never thought he'd do, and it was helping him untangle the insecurities that had driven his entitlement. One evening, he came to my house alone, the river glowing orange under a sunset. We sat on the porch, the air smelling of lavender from my garden, and he told me about his sessions. "I've been a lousy son," he said, his voice low. "I grew up knowing you'd always be there, so I took you for granted. Therapy's making me see how selfish that was. I want to be better for you, for Sam, for myself." I looked at him, the boy I'd raised now, a man learning to grow. "I'm proud of you for trying, Ben," I said. "It's not easy, looking at yourself like that, but you're doing it." He nodded, his eyes on the river. "I keep thinking about your painting, that kitchen. I didn't know what it meant until now. I'm sorry, Mom, for not seeing you sooner." I reached for his hand, squeezing it. "You see me now, that's enough. By summer, we'd found a rhythm." I'd visit Crestwood once a week, playing with Samuel, teaching him to stack blocks or giggle at the ducks by their backyard pond. Ben and Claire moved to a smaller house in Brighton Hills, a cozy craftsman with a swing in the yard. They'd sold the Crestwood place, using the equity to start a college fund for Sam. "It's what you did for me," Ben said one day, helping me plant roses in my garden. "I want to do it for him, but smarter, without losing myself." Claire joined us sometimes, bringing Samuel in a picnic basket, and we'd sit by the river, the air thick with the scent of wildflowers. She'd talk about her struggles with Evelyn, her dreams for Sam, and I'd listen, offering advice when she asked. It wasn't perfect, there were still awkward moments, old wounds that stung, but it was real, built on respect, not obligation. My life in Riverbend Heights bloomed. 2. I painted more, filling my house with canvases of the river, my garden, Samuel's chubby hands. Susan and I started a book club at the community centre, reading everything from Jane Austen to local memoirs. And Henry joined us, his poems becoming a regular feature. The community centre became my second home, its brick walls and coffee-stained tables, a reminder that I'd found a family beyond blood. One memory stands out. From a warm August evening, I'd invited Ben, Claire, and Samuel for dinner, my kitchen smelling of roasted chicken and fresh bread. We sat around the dining table, the pendant light casting a golden glow, and Samuel babbled, smearing mashed potatoes on his face. Claire laughed, a sound I hadn't heard before, and Ben reached for my hand under the table, squeezing it. "Thanks, Mom," he said, his voice soft. "For everything. Not just this, but, you know," I smiled, my heart full. "You're welcome, Ben. But this is for me, too." After they left, I stood on the porch, the river a silver ribbon under the stars. I thought of Dr. Langley, his letter urging me to live. I'd done that, not just with his money, but with my choices to paint, to set boundaries, to love without losing myself. I was Maggie Walsh, artist, grandmother, friend, and for the first time, I felt whole. A year later, as I write this, I'm still in Riverbend Heights. My house a patchwork of memories, sketches on the walls, tulips blooming in the garden, Samuel's laughter echoing from his visits. I paint every day, and I've sold a few more pieces at local galleries, each one a step deeper into the woman I was always meant to be. Ben and Claire are building their life in Brighton Hills, stronger for the lessons we've all learned. They don't ask for money, only time, and I give it gladly, knowing it's my choice. Samuel's 2 now, a sturdy toddler with Ben's eyes and a love for splashing in the river. I take him to the water sometimes, showing him how the light dances on the surface, and I tell him stories not just about his dad, but about me, about the kitchen light that never went out. I want him to know that strength isn't just in what you give, but in what you claim for yourself. The Willamette keeps flowing, constant yet ever-changing, and I'm part of it now. At 66, I've learned that you don't need to sacrifice everything to be loved. You just need to be yourself, fully and unapologetically. That's the gift Dr. Langley gave me. Not in dollars, but in truth, I am enough. Thank you for walking this journey with me, for seeing me through the long nights and the bright days. If my story has touched you, hit that subscribe button to join me for more tales of heart and hope, and please, drop a comment below. How have you found your own river of freedom? I'd love to hear your story. Well, my dear friends, that's Maggie Walsh's story, a journey from the shadows of sacrifice to the glow of her own light. Ain't it something? How we can find ourselves again, no matter how many years we've given away, here in Eufaula. Under my own porch light, I'm reminded that we're all a little like Maggie, stitching our lives with love and learning to shine for ourselves. I hope her tale warmed your heart and sparked a bit of hope. If it did, tap that subscribe button to keep our storytelling circle growing. It means the world to us old gals sharing these tales. Drop a comment. 2. Tell me about a time you found your light or a lesson you've carried. Grab another glass of sweet tea, and I'll see you next time with another story from the heart. Stay strong, y'all.